Oh, that's too much wood. Yeah. What's that?
Private public partnerships, I don't think it specifically calls out parks, but there's no reason why there was a private public partnership. Commercial avenue, we could do something.
No, I mean, you have the public-private partnership statute.
Typically do it if it's
They can't give you an answer.
I've had many conversations.
It should be, you should know.
He should know one way or the other.
It's like the statute provides for civil penalties for violations.
Oh, so there is a penalty set up.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is our August 29th, 2022 workshop. And Lori, can I get roll call, please?
Mayor Young,
Here?
Vice Mayor Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Neander.
Here.
Councilmember Brandon,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Thank you. All right, Jeremy?
Let me bring it up real quick. Sorry. Yeah. So the first item is just, I guess, the further discussion on undergrounding. Previous workshop, council directed staff to go back and bring it back to a future workshop with discussion. In your packet, I have reached out to Kimley Horn and really came up with what I guess they feel and what staff feels is the next step in this process if council decides to go forward with that. I think the scope of work is in your packet on what they will provide and basically feasibility and moving forward, so we know what the next steps are as well. A representative from Kimley Horn is here, actually two of them. I'm going to ask some questions of them. I know they were here at the last workshop and maybe it didn't get fully vetted or there's some additional questions. I've asked them to come back, or they volunteered to come back, and really talking about really what the next steps are from the village standpoint if we want to move forward. So with that, if Kevin, if you want to come up.
Hi, good evening. Kevin Shannon. I'm with Kimley Horn Associates. I'm a principal. I've been with the firm for 24 years, and undergrounding of utilities is my practice. Currently serving a number of different municipalities in various stages of conversion right now. The largest one we're doing is the town of Palm Beach. We're leading the design of that particular program and now into construction of that. They have about 37 miles of overhead power to and communications to be converted. So what we've prepared for you tonight is a feasibility analysis, which we consider as a good first step. It allows us to get involved with the utilities that have facilities on your poles, do some data collection with them, really figure out what you've got out there and what it would take to convert all of that underground. We also look at things like what the right-of-way situation is like, how many easements you might be anticipating with a program like this, putting together overall costs that include FPL, the communication providers, restoration needs, any utility work that may have to happen, street lighting. It's a real holistic look at everything you could be getting into in an undergrounding program. We also describe the process. We can help you understand what the initial steps are, next steps, what all that looks like, what community impacts can be, and it's just a really good first step when you're kind of dipping your toe just to see what you'd be getting into. Be able to have a lot of questions answered and help you formulate, if you want to decide to continue moving forward, what that looks like moving down the road.
Thank you. Any council comments?
I've got two questions for you.
Sure.
We lived out in Southern California. We lived in South Orange County. Everything was undergrounded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not just the homes, but all the main transmission lines. Everything was undergrounded. And that structure was hardened, so it was fairly earthquake resistant. One of the concerns I heard when we were at the last meeting, they said, well, if we underground, there's a greater degree of reliability. If something goes down, it's a greater challenge to fix it. But then they talked about the risk of flooding and, as I understood what he was saying, water seepage. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, if you've got these lines underground and they're encased properly, if they can do it in California, which is not exactly known for quality government control things, if they can do it in California where they've got the hardened system to protect against earthquakes, wouldn't we be doing something comparable to that here to provide greater security around those lines? That was question one. Then question two was, this talks about within the village boundaries, but we've got these little pockets. So we've talked about the need to really look at the entire area. What do we do about those little pockets? I mean, that's Palm Beach County, unincorporated. Mm-hmm. What do we need to do to bring them into the fold? Eventually, we'd like to annex those, or hopefully we can. But obviously, we don't want to have a piecemeal system out there. That doesn't make any sense for the community.
So to your first question regarding hardening of the system, FPL every year they put out what they call a reliability report. The PSC requires that they do that. They've shown throughout their entire system that systems that are completely undergrounded outperform those that are either hybrid or completely aerial. And when I say hybrid, that's a mix of aerial and underground. The hybrid systems still significantly outperform the overhead when you look at the performance metrics that they're looking at. There's customer outages, times that people are down, frequency of interruption. They perform better. Like Hal had said, Hal Tran, when he was here about a month ago or so giving his presentation, he said there's really no silver bullet in anything. You mitigate against the types of disruptions that you see frequently. Here in South Florida, we see a lot of wind event, much more so than flooding. It's not to say that flooding doesn't happen, it does. And the system is impacted in different ways. Certainly FPL has a lot of service to a lot of homes, businesses that exist in flood-prone areas, and their system does get flooded from time to time. They have protocols on how they deal with that, but I would say that in my experience, and I'm a native of Palm Beach County, I've been here my whole life, been through every hurricane since 1976 at least here. It's the wind that's been a larger disruptor here in Palm Beach County than has been the flooding. But it's not to say that you go underground, you're never going to have a problem, because that's not true. You'll just have less problems than you do with the overhead.
But when they're laying the lines in the ground, are they putting it in a conduit?
Yes.
To protect it?
Yeah, it's in conduit to be protected, and the cables that they use underground, they're waterproof, so but that's not really what you're worried about, more or less the above ground equipment that gets flooded. That's the concern. To your second question, which was how do you deal with the pockets? We have unincorporated Palm Beach County, even up into Martin County here. There's a couple different ways to do it. The first one is you can leave those portions out of the of a program, and you would just transition back to overhead in those particular areas. That gets done rather frequently in a number of different places. And then the example I can think of on the other side of it was in Palm Beach. There's a segment, if you're familiar with the Lake Worth Beach Casino, Lake Worth Road, where it goes over the intercoastal. There's a portion of the island there that's Lake Worth, and that there's a section of FPL that runs through Lake Worth along A1A, and it bifurcates essentially two parts of the town. The town made the decision to not transition overhead there. They actually funded the undergrounding of that line through Lake Worth's municipal limits in order to achieve the reliability benefits that they would get by having that whole line underground. So you can do it however you'd like. You can convert what's not yours, or you can let it remain overhead.
Okay. So have you had any experience where, for example, Palm Beach County, the county now, has come alongside a municipality and said, okay, we're willing to, you want underground, we understand we have these pockets, they're not an NextJet. We're willing to work hand in hand with you to help move this project forward so you don't have these outliers. Have you had any experience?
The most recent experience I've had with working with another municipality like that was in North Palm. We went through a master planning process there, and where the county's got a lot of traffic fiber strung through the village. And within that, and obviously we haven't gone to construction or anything like that, but we did have discussions with the county, and they were willing to work with the village, but we didn't get so far down the road as to who was going to be financially responsible, or whether they were happy to pitch in because they were going to get some benefit out of that facility being underground. But they were willing to work with us on converting those facilities.
Okay.
So we have about 8 different unincorporated pockets, 8 or so in our area. Would your proposal be able to isolate those pockets and maybe put up a cost for this type of project if we wanted to pursue those specific pockets?
Yeah, I mean, we could look at we could segment that out. Once we get the data, in from FPL, we could look at that as a separate pocket and kind of give you an idea of what that would be in addition to the municipal limits. Yeah, I don't see that as being an issue.
Okay. I'd be interested if we wanted to move forward to have that knowledge.
Yeah, I would too.
I didn't really have a question, but when you were initially presenting just now, you did mention that you'll be contacting other utilities, and I like to hear that because that's even the areas that just got done in the village, they had undergrounding, but the other utilities did not go down as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to having you guys add that, so that way it would be a full drop down, not just half down. The other half is still in a shaky, rotten out wood pole. I appreciate that, looking at the structure of the utilities as well, because some of the poles in the village are very frightening.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff that's out there, and I think you're referring to the Storm Secure program that they came through and they did FPL did their part, but then the communications are still in the poles. Yeah,
I know the residents would be interested in having the whole thing done.
Right.
Tell us what it'd be, not just half and half. And
right.
Yeah, and it's not just the wires when they fall. I mean, there's residents that have concerns over the shakiness of some of those old utility poles. So just adding that to the package, I think, is beneficial. And I'm glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson, you have a comment?
None for me.
Okay, I had a couple quick questions, and some of them echo what has already been said. We talked about this at the last workshop, so I wanted to confirm that maybe like a high-level phasing plan is included in this feasibility study, and then also along with that, how to handle the unincorporated areas, because I know we talked about looking at it as a whole, but what phasing would look like.
So in this, we didn't go as far as phasing in the current scope of work. That's a much larger effort to go through and figure that out, because the way that we do that is looking fairly deep mostly with FPL and then also with Comcast. In how to chop up the phase areas, there's a lot of technical ways to do that we do that in a way that is most cost efficient, and that requires us looking at switch locations, node locations, understanding how Comcast has programmed in various properties to be serviced by their fiber node units, and because reprogramming that can add a lot of cost to the projects, and so that's more of like a master planning style exercise, which would be sort of a next step in the evolution of this. This would give that holistic cost of here's what it is to do the entire village, and then later on down the road, putting together a phasing plan, putting together a sequencing plan, scheduling, and working it out like that. So I think on a high level, we would probably be able to say that we think that the village could be converted in this number of phases, but we couldn't actually show you where they were, because that's a level of effort that's beyond what we've given you tonight.
Okay, I think a high level maybe would at least be beneficial if that could be included, because I think if we decide to go this route and then we want to communicate the program with residents because we're going to want to make sure the residents are in favor of this because they'll be paying for it. I think we might have a hard time explaining it if we don't even have a high level idea of what the phasing could look like.
Yeah, I think we could certainly say we think you'll have this number of phases, which would then be equivalent to this many years of impact as to how long the construction would take to actually go from design through poles down.
Okay, that'd be great. My other question was, I know if a homeowner has to bring any of their wiring up to code, do you guys have any idea and can kind of give a high-level estimate of what that would cost a homeowner if they have to bring their wiring up to code?
It's a good question, and it's something that honestly we've found to be quite rare. Because of the way that we connect to the meters. I mean, many times when we do see this, and any typical phase that we've done, you might have anywhere between 150 to 300 homes in a particular phase. In every phase, you might find maybe 2 or 3 that need something. The latest one that I saw was where the meter can was just rotten, and they just couldn't make a connection to the lugs inside the meter can, and so they replaced the guts of the can, and that's like a $1,000 deal to do that. In this instance, just to keep things rolling along, the client elected to fund that, so we're not trying to chase a homeowner down for something that is holding up the project essentially as we're doing conversions. But it's not something that we often see, because we're not going past that meter. As long as we can make the connection to the lugs inside the meter, we're not really moving beyond that. Sometimes in coastal communities like this, you can find corrosion and things like that you've got to deal with, and you see an unsafe condition, you have to deal with it, but it's not very often at all. So. It's hard to say though exactly, like I said, this last one was about $1,000, but I think the worst one we ever saw was like $7,000, and that was where there was just a lot of rot, and it was in a very old and unmaintained home.
Okay, so maybe in your report you could put something like, based on our, historical data, any homeowner costs have ranged from 1,000, 7,000, just something in there. So again, we have that piece of information.
Yeah. To give a generalization like that, we can do that. It can be all over the place, but at the same time, we would carry a contingency in the numbers that we put forth in there to kind of cover things like that. But it's not like every other house you're running into these types of problems.
Okay. I know the Storm Secure Underground Program, we talked about a little bit at the workshop. The FPL's rep name is escaping me, but he didn't go into too much detail with that in the long-term plan. I think it'd be nice to know a little more about that program and understand it better, because, you know, there has been statements that, well, eventually FPL is going to underground everything, so why are we going to pay for it? So I would really like to understand that program and what it looks like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, whatever they have. I think that'll help us make the decision too.
So with the Storm Secure, they certainly have a long-term program, and what they're focused in on are laterals. So they're not focused in on any of the mainline feeders. And so if you didn't do anything, presumably 30 years from now, you know, your laterals would be dealt with. Now, it'd be similar to what Ms. Brandon had said, where they do their thing, they chop off the poles, and the communications are kind of left to their own devices. But it would be true that, you know, you think about lines, but not all lines behind people's homes, because some of those are feeders as well. But if it's a truly just a lateral, those would be removed. And then if you think about mainline infrastructure, you know, on your main streets where you do have the feeders, those would be hardened over time. So that's really what Storm Secure, you know, does. They kind of focus in on their thing. The communications are left, and the communications, they don't really have any type of funding or program or anything organized right now to be able to do something similar to what FPL is doing.
Okay, yep, I agree.
Yeah. And then as far as like how they do that over the next 30 years, they really plan in 2-year intervals, and so they'll know what they're going to do in the next 2 years, and then depending on what priorities emerge or go away within the system, they look at it again 2 years later. So 5, 10, 15, they can't tell you. You know, every 2 years they'd be able to kind of give you an update as to what's going on in your community.
Okay, and then my last question is, your proposal just said agreed upon schedule. Do you have, like, what would this project take for you typically? Like 3 months, 6 months, 8 months? I mean, what's the ballpark?
It's in the 3 to 6 month realm, and just because of the data that we're trying to collect with the utilities, we gather everything that they can give us at an atlas level, and then we come out here in the field to truth a lot of it, you know, because sometimes the atlases, particularly in the communications, they don't always update things very well. FPL does a good job of that, but the communications can sometimes lag on improvements, and so we like to come out and take a look and see if we find some unknown utility providers that are using the poles. Sometimes you see private fiber, you know, beyond what AT&T or Comcast might have. You might find traffic. There's just a number of things that you know we do out here in the field to be able to truth what we've got to make sure that we're giving you a good holistic cost. But that 3 to 6 month realm gives us enough time to be able to schedule, receive information, work with it, get out in the field, and then prepare a report, and then working within your schedule of council meetings to come back and provide input, a presentation of our findings.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think, again, talk a lot about FPL, but this is for all the utilities, and FPL is always a big focus because I have experience on projects. They're the big hurdle, and then the other utilities are a lot easier to schedule, get underground, all that stuff. So it's always, FPL is usually the driver. And
that's exactly correct.
So that's why the focus kind of on FPL, but it is for the whole package, which we need to know. So, all right, any other council comments?
One other comment, future needs. How do you plan for what we don't know is coming next? Typically during master planning, like when in a feasibility assessment, we would give you a cost for like a like-for-like type conversion. So, you know, there's certainly upgrade possibilities that are out there, particularly with the communication providers. There's a few options with FPL regarding the types of equipment. There's standard equipment, and they do have some upgrade choices, particularly in the switches for FPL, but mostly with the communication providers, whether they would come back with a traditional system or an upgraded system. There's trade-offs, you know, because you can come back with an upgraded system, and there could be third-party contracts that rely on copper service and not fiber service, and then they have to have an overlay, and you're essentially building 2 systems so that you can maintain existing legacy service and on top of providing the fiber.
So, those are all decision points to be made. Like for like is generally going to be your lowest cost option, and when you start adding upgrades and things like that, we don't find that communication providers are falling over themselves to upgrade the systems during these things. They want you to pay for that upgrade. They're happy to just provide a like service. Now, even with a like service, they are replacing some very old infrastructure with brand new current specification equipment. And the clients that we've worked with that have gone like for like, their customers, the customers in the community have reported much enhanced service, just with the same type of system, but with new infrastructure.
And then in your experience, have you had any other municipalities where another utility's come in and put more poles in after you removed them?
No, I haven't seen that yet. No, I mean, I guess that could be 5G, when you're looking at microcells and things like that. And they've got some protections with the state and the FCC on where they can do those. I've had various municipalities talk about how to plan for those, and it's hard because it's a very unique. It's very unique to the provider as to where they're interested in placing a microcell, how tall it would need to be, what kind of equipment they need. And so we start talking about like smart pole deployment. Where I see those being successful are, say like public parks or commercial areas, places where, you kind of want to control the environment a little bit. That there's going to be a desire for those type of companies to be in there. And then, kind of setting some rules in the code regarding maximum heights, the aesthetics, density of poles, those types of requirements. I see that being successful. I haven't really seen municipalities just provide a pole in a residential neighborhood. It's not usually very desirable for a company because there's not a lot of revenue that's being generated there. They look for mass quantities of people with a lot of phones, in a small area. That's a money maker for them.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? All right, any public comment? Mr. Bradford, I saw your hand first.
go ahead. I'll follow you.
Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail. I'm not opposed to this, so please don't take what I'm about to say in the wrong way. Kevin Shannon and the team he will put together are the best. I worked with him for all of the work that was done undergrounding when I was still there, and they'll do a fantastic job. But what I don't understand is, why are you doing this now? In my opinion, I can't understand. Well, let me state it this way. It's earlier than I would have done it if I were in charge. Which therefore begs the question in my mind, why are you doing it now? What are you going to do with the information when you get it? And how are you going to treat the subdivisions and portions of the Tequesta Country Club that's got partial undergrounding? How are you going to treat those areas is what I'd like to know.
I think that's what part of getting this plan is, to really understand the whole picture, the phasing, having the areas identified at a high level of the overall cost, and then we can understand the whole scope and make those decisions.
Well, to have a meaningful piece of information for a property owner would require a whole nother study called a methodology for the assessment of costs. It doesn't do a homeowner any good to find out this project is $40 million. What does that mean to them? What does it mean to the person who's partially undergrounded? What does it mean to the person that's already totally undergrounded, like where Marcia and I live? So just so you understand that this is just one piece of a puzzle. And it's an important piece, and it can be done now. I think my relationship with you is such that it makes me wonder whether you've thought through entirely the other pieces of the puzzle that you will need to make a coherent distribution of information to your public that you represent, is what comes to my mind.
Well, and I think, Kevin, maybe you can comment, and 'cause I believe you and Jeremy spoke about what, for lack of a better term, I'll say the full diesel plan to do like the full analysis, and you guys thought that this was the best step to go with what the proposal we have in front of us. So do you maybe want to elaborate on that? Because it sounds like that's what Mr. Bradford is talking about.
Yeah, so this would be just that first step, and so you'd have that idea of, okay, is this a $40 million program? Is it a $100 million program? Is it a $20 million program? You'd have that part of it. You'd have a number of other details. And then at that point, with that knowledge, if you decided that you wanted to continue to move forward, then what Mr. Bradford just explained with an assessment methodology would be your logical next step, because then that assessment methodology consultant would then take the feasibility study, and then they would turn that into, what does this mean to someone that lives, in this neighborhood or this neighborhood? You can pretty much assign, a cost per property that's generally specific to a property. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not, evenly split by square footage or anything like that. There's a number of different ways to assign a methodology, but that's where that methodology consultant would take this and move it into that. And then with that information, you would then have every person in the village would then understand what their contribution would need to be over some period of time, depending on how it was financed.
And did you put that cost together already, or no? You guys just talked about it, and we didn't have the actual cost yet.
That's what this does. Yeah, I haven't done any work to try and figure out how much
What that would cost
what
for
the
your
roundabout.
services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking through our conversations, looking at that, it was gonna be, just in my mind, it was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because he showed me a couple examples, we're gonna be looking at double the cost. And so for me, what we could swallow, what would get us to a point where, because the worst thing we want is a study that costs us $120,000 that sits on a shelf.
Right.
And so we can get a better estimate of what we think the project's gonna cost, and then decide if we think that other investment's, worthy. So that's why, that was a couple of the thought processes as we talked about the scope of this. Obviously, there's a lot of municipalities that take this route instead of, I think Town of Palm Beach went straight to the master plan, and, we can obviously bypass this if you guys want, and we'll bring back the proposal that's, significantly more and gives you more detail.
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of the smaller step to get an idea of the whole project, and if we think we want to continue down the road. That's my opinion.
I would agree with that.
I'd like to, Mr. Bradford, you mentioned you wouldn't start this now. If not now, when? I don't understand what you mean by that.
Well, I'm more of a politician than an engineer, meaning, my degrees were in political science and public administration. I would want to flush out more of what's the typical thinking of the typical Tequesta resident.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why I had talked about starting out with a task force to help flush out, is Tequesta Country Club want it? Does Jupiter in the Pines not want it? There's some information out there that I would want, but, Kevin is an engineer, and he's a good one, and I'm more of the political, public opinion realm, is why I felt like it's a little early. But it's if you end up going the whole 9 yards, this is an important first step. It's just earlier than I would have done it. And I came back up here because I have a bit of good news I want to share for you, but it's primarily for Kevin to hear it. Is when I was surveying Tequesta Country Club, I noticed in those areas where, they have the partial weird thing of storm secure, where the telecommunications are still on the poles. What I noticed was that the number of homes served by FPL transformers is almost double than that in the town of Palm Beach. So that's a potential piece of good news, and maybe he can use it to fight them if they try to gold plate what they want to do in Tequesta, like they usually try to do in other cities, to fight and say, hey, you know, what you did on Storm Secure on this street, you know, you don't need to have it one for every 5 houses or 4 houses. Might be 8 to 10, and that saves you guys money. So I just wanted to say that. So Kip, he probably already knows it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Marcia?
Marcia Nielsen, 94 Beechwood Trail. Somehow, the last meeting I went to, we were only talking about country club. Now we're talking kind of universal. So my thing, I'm going to go back to the country club. The last time we talked, FPL stood up here and went through their whole thing, and they said, ballpark, $6 million for country club. That's $10,000 per residential home, $10,000. If you get the $2 million off, you're down to $7,000 per home. Now, I'll just put my history hat on and go back to ENCON when the village spent over $1 million fighting that, and then when the residents had to eat it, and they all were assessed for something that the village fought, and we paid for that. I live in a place where there's all underground wires. I do not want to pay for somebody else's underground wires. That is unfair. We paid for it in our homes. We have it. If you want to start surveying country club, then go over and survey them and tell them it's going to be $10,000 per home. And I'll guarantee you what the answer will be. It'll be the same as what they had to do with ENCON. How many years ago? We're going again. You know, and when you start to talk about this and you put it out there, then people want it. And if you're not realistic about what it's going to cost them, then when does the rubber hit the road? And you've promised stuff that you can't deliver without a whole lot of money. So just, I'm with Tom, and that's unusual, that it's premature. You have other things on your plate that is much more important, much more important. Just, you know, it's just, the timing is terrible. We may be going into recession. We have 30% of our people here who are senior citizens. The average senior citizen on Social Security is living on $20,000. Think about that. And you're talking about underground wires. You don't need them. This is not something that's like the water system where you must do it. You don't have to do this. That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, so council, what would you like to do?
Well, I think, to your point, Mayor, I think, and I understand where Tom's coming from, but to go out and talk to people, people are going to have questions. And I think part of the purpose, as you indicated, in taking this step forward, is at least begin to generate some information that will be relevant to answering some of those questions, if not all of them. So, and I do think that this is the future at some point in time. So I think getting started now, to me, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. Just for that reason alone, you know, how much is this going to cost me is going to be the #1 question from every homeowner, including myself. And if I don't have that answer, what are we talking about? You know, not even a ballpark, right? And not just that question, but many others. So I agree, Frank. This is a good first step. And then, you know, if we do, like Mr. Bradford said, a task force or put something together like that, that's something we'll workshop also. But I think this is a good step in the right direction.
So just so I understand, this isn't going to provide us that dollar amount per household?
Right.
We're gonna have to spend another $80,000 to $100,000 to get that number.
Right, that's why I said not just how much is it gonna cost, but just some kind of answer, you know?
Yeah, the full meal deal. I mean, this is everything. I mean, because Kevin, will this even have estimates for, you know, you'll have repairs to do? I'm sure some will be boards, some will probably have to be open trench. I mean, is it going to have costs for all of the repairs, like landscaping, streets, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it'll have all that in there, and there's we'll have meetings with staff to understand, what level of restoration, landscaping, you want to do, because there's decisions to be made about what you want in and what you don't want in. Some places want lots of landscaping, done by the municipality to screen the equipment, whereas others don't find that to be very important, and so they don't include those costs. So that's part of the collaboration between us and the village throughout the entire process to be able to build up the number to what we believe it would be if you embarked on this project.
And I brought this up last meeting too, Jeremy would have to consider, would we have to hire a new employee to manage something like this, or would a current employee, it's a lot to think about, and I think if we proceed this way, we could get the whole, full meal deal of understanding of what the potential costs, and we might be like, no, so I don't know how we move forward without having this information, and I'm pretty positive that this was a strategic initiative before I was even on council, so I don't know what the driver was to add that, and how, from a prioritization standpoint, why that was on there, how important it was to council at the time, and I think you guys might have a good answer for that.
Well, I think it was being considered for exploration previously, and I think the other benefit that could occur, and another reason maybe to start this process now is, when Jupiter Inlet Colony undergrounded, we also went in and replaced all the water mains. We piggybacked onto their undergrounding process and their sewer installation. So as we're talking about, replacing the water distribution system and some of the other work that we're doing, you'll have to look at all this obviously and see if you can bring it together, but there could be opportunities to piggyback on some of this work so that there's a more efficiency, better economies on some of the work maybe in the future. So that's another reason I think to kind of get it started. And we can talk to Inlet Colony too about some of their experiences. They were going through the process.
Yeah, if I may, that is something that a lot of municipalities that do this, they do take advantage of the cost sharing between various programs, be it the utility, water, sewer, drainage versus the undergrounding. Because if you do cut the road, with a water main and an undergrounding, installation at the same time, you can share things like paving and restoration between the two different programs, and that generally reduces the cost of any kind of assessment that goes to the neighborhood because of that shared. And there's savings then also to the municipality because you're kind of cutting your restoration costs in half. Even within, and Tom will know this from Palm Beach, we had deals with the city of West Palm Beach on water, and then also with Florida Public Utilities on gas. And so when there was road repaving to be done, gas was in at the same time as the undergrounding, and so the Florida Public Utilities was paying for half the road to be paved.
And then I guess the other question is the budget, because this is not in the budget right now. I think you guys know how I feel about the current budget. Is this important enough to potentially take that list that Jeremy had and offset this cost with getting rid of some of the projects that were on the list of, that we're talking about the budget workshop? And how do you want to cover this expense?
That's what we'd have to do, I think, right? Well,
You can take it out of
what would be the other option?
I think we're gonna have a sizable contribution to the general fund. We could just reduce it by this amount.
What are we talking about, 48?
I would be in favor of maybe, if this is important to us and we go down this road, I would be in favor of deleting some of the projects that were on the
Like the
list.
chamber projects.
I don't know, can you pull up that slide, or, sorry, I'm gonna
Or the,
mess up your screen situation. Because why, this was like 40-something thousand, right?
49.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, I like those projects. I don't know that I'd want to strike any one of those. But before hearing Brad and Mr. Bradford speak about the the sound in here, I maybe would have said council, the chamber upgrades, but I think now we have to stick with that. I don't think I would strike anything up there.
I mean, I feel like the beautification of the gateways, I would still be in favor of striking that because, again, I think we should wait until we have Treasure Coast Regional Planning's final plan because they're working on stuff that's relevant to that.
I would agree with that. The only thing I would say is we talked about the roundabout feeding into Publix. And we said that that would be something they had even encouraged us that we move pretty quickly on that item. Jeremy, I don't know how much of that $37,000 would need to be allocated for that one particular item.
It's gonna be a lot more than that. We
Yeah.
got
Okay.
we got an estimate to do, Mr. Stone wanted us to look at, around, I think Bruce, Mr. Prince was involved, a roundabout at the north entrance of Country Club. And we got an estimate for $1.2 million, not counting land acquisition, to do it there. So,
Well, no, I'm not.
so your cost for engineering and all that are gonna be 10% of that. I mean, so you
Well, and
know,
I guess that gets back to the issue, that's a county road, so we'd want the county to pay for it, I know.
right. And I would guess I think the preliminary conversations is, they'll be more than happy to, look at that, but we're gonna have to take the cost on.
If I'm being completely honest, I would absolutely sleep on the idea of spending the $49,000 for this, at least for right this split second, and here's why. So as much as I would absolutely love underground wires, and for me, it's not necessarily an aesthetic thing, it's for a safety thing, because like I mentioned, we have had wires replaced in my area, but the poles that they replace the wires on are absolutely shredding apart. And when the wires fall, literally with just a storm like we had yesterday, we have children that play in those yards. You get a little bit of flooding in someone's yard, so you have electrical running through the yard. So for me, it's a bigger safety issue. However, I have been mentioned by residents, what Mrs. Nielsen said, do we absolutely need it right this split second? I mean, the power works. It's not like they're falling down left and right. So it's just, do the residents want us to do it right this split second and cut something that they want right now, such as like the Cuesta Fest out? For me, I might just have to sleep on it and really weigh what I think the residents are really gonna want us to push right this split second.
And I would agree with you, although, again, we're not talking about taking concrete action this split second. All we're talking
I
about is
know.
getting, the ball
But it has to be
rolling.
paid for, so.
I know, I mean, again, I kind of feel like, kind of feel like Aaron. I like all the projects that are there. I think they all have value. I think they all are going to benefit our residents. How much were we putting into the general fund to build up reserves this year, Jeremy? We were making what, like a $600,000 contribution?
I don't think I don't think it was that much, but you also remember that we also have 2 union contracts we're still negotiating, so.
Oh, okay, so those, okay. I mean, I guess the one place, I love Tequesta Fest, but I have to admit at this point, I have some mixed feelings about spending $100,000 for Tequesta Fest. The last couple of years, we went to Parks and Rec and had them do some, smaller events that I think seem to be well received by our residents. I don't know, I'd be tempted to say, let's cut Tequesta Fest down for a year, do some of the smaller activities, and apply some of that money to this purpose, if we don't want to take it out of general funds.
So I'd be okay with cutting the beautification of the gateway and then cutting the relocation of the podium. I think that's the majority of where the cost is for the upgrades for the chamber. And then whatever difference, using general fund to pay for it.
Do that too.
I could go with that.
That's where I'm leaning. If this is a priority, I mean, I think that those two make the most sense. Because I don't want to increase the budget at all.
No, but I could live with that for now.
What was
If
it?
that-
I'm
if
sorry,
that pays for the vast
what
majority
was the
of it.
direction? Because I only heard.
So let me speak closer.
In the back 'cause
Sorry.
I couldn't hear that part either. so-
Let me help you out here.
Oh, I can't even hear that.
So what I said is that we would cut the beautification of the gateways for this year. and then cut the relocation of the podium.
Okay.
And whatever the difference is, take from the general fund,
if any.
if any is necessary.
Okay. Well, then we'll bring you this item back for a vote. Might not be till October, because our deadline is tomorrow, so probably be October we bring this to you guys for a decision.
Okay, all right, we'll move on to agenda item 2, which is discussion on future purchase and financing of parkland. Jeremy?
Yeah, give me a second. So at the previous workshop, I think it was August 11th workshop, which is, I guess, the last one, or was a regular council meeting, Mr. DeAmber brought up the idea of bonding out for parks, similar to what Jupiter has done in the past. But I know Ms. Young has talked about this a couple of times, as well as some other council members, about having a dedicated fund for purchase of parks. And so what staff has done is put together what that would look like, not only the bond and the referendum, but also other funding options moving forward. And so just looking at, and you guys have seen this presentation, but looking at just what the intent of this is, being established as an environmentally friendly, sensitive waterfront recreational lands, lands for open spaces, planning and development of space required by the village, archaeological and historic preservation, traffic mitigation, and costs associated with maintaining lands acquired through the park program. So what is our options to fund these? So we looked at some bond funding, what this would look like, even at a bank qualified loan, which we're not, depending on the timing of this, we're not sure that we could do this one, because you have to have borrow less than $10 million in a calendar year. And in our situation with the SRF loans and some of the other debt that we have, we're not sure that we'll be able to qualify for that one. So in this scenario, you're probably more likely the bond issuance, and do it through a referendum. We have provided the estimated annual payments, and then what the average homeowner will be paying at $500,000. And then looking at other options, we obviously have pay-as-you-go options, donations. We do allow for it in our donation policy now. I attached the donation policy, but more just to tell you that we do have that ability to accept a donation for parks now. Obviously, private-public partnerships, there is a Florida statute that governs these, but with public-private partnerships, if somebody's willing to dedicate some land and there's a value for both sides, you could do something like that. Like in the case of Remembrance Park, may not be as feasible just because that's mainly a residential area. You don't want commercial in there, you don't want a lot of high traffic, but maybe in something like if we own Paradise Park, there may be an option for that. We don't own it, so I don't know what value necessary that we can provide for that partnership, but in future, if we do acquire future lands, maybe there's some opportunity there for public-private partnerships. Obviously, grants, we've been successful with the FERDAP grant. We are applying for the $400,000. Recently, I say recently, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we did apply for $800,000 grant through FERDAP to purchase the art center over there. Of course, that fell through, but we were granted for the grant, but we did apply for that grant and were awarded that. We ended up having to give it back, or the time expired, because they weren't willing to sell or interested in selling at that point. Recreation impact fees, we do have this. I mean, it's pretty minimal source of revenue now. Obviously, we can always look at some increasing those. But there has to be a rational nexus, though, so you can't just jump to a huge fee. We'd have to really look at that. I don't know that how much that would help us being able to provide a rational nexus. And then, of course, you guys have heard Treasure Coast, an open space requirement with development. I think that's probably the step forward. The easiest step forward going is trying to get some open space out of developers. So that was I also attached some sample ballot that Jupiter had, and their sample resolution that they did establishing this bond. Recently, I sent you guys out the land that they purchased with this $20 million bond that they did. And, for their bond, their average citizen was paying, I think, $66 versus the $210. So I think we've provided the information that was requested from council, but I'm happy to answer any other questions or, further the discussion.
Thank you. Council comments?
Well, I guess my thought was kind of like when they talk about energy, it was kind of all the above. So, we're not just looking at solar panels and electric cars, we're looking at using the resources we have. So I like the idea of the bond because we're putting it to the voters to say either we see value here or we do not, and it's their choice. But by the same token, that doesn't mean we don't strive for appropriations, for example, for Tequesta Park, which we were not successful in last year, but as Senator Brown said when he was here last month, we would continue those efforts. It doesn't mean we don't apply for grants. It doesn't mean we don't seek private donations. And if we're successful in those efforts to raise funds, then that would allow us to retire the bonds early, which would then reduce, the obligations that the citizens, if they choose to take the bond on, would have taken upon themselves. So I know there's always early call provisions with the bond. We'd have to look at what those might be if we were to go forward with one. But I just think we just don't have a pool of funds, and I don't see us taking some, real action, see us being able to generate a pool of funds in the near future. And, Paradise Park is not a done deal. There is a very real chance that Paradise Park may fall through. And, if you look around the village and you look at, what parcels are available to us, that is by far and away, in my mind, the preeminent parcel. And I think if we were able to acquire it and develop it, and that, as you said, Jeremy, that may be where ultimately, perhaps, depending on sources of fund, a private-public partnership could come into play. Then I think the development opportunities around it on Bridge Road and on Tequesta Drive become very significant. So whatever tax money we lose by developing Paradise Park, I think we could very well make up with development around the area. I'm still, with Tequesta Park, again, I think part of the bond issue that we'd be talking about would ostensibly be to help fund improvements there, although, as I've said all along, I'm not really in favor of using taxpayer money there because to any significant degree, because we don't own it. But I do know there's grants available that you have to have some kind of a match. And right now, we don't even have a pool of funds even to do a match at this point. So I'm still hopeful with respect to Tequesta Park that we can find other ways to generate money. So, the $10 million envisions funding that would not only cover Remembrance, Paradise, some of our other desires, but, a significant component for Tequesta Park. Maybe maybe we don't need 10, maybe we can do, 5 or 6. Maybe we can do a somewhat reduced number with the idea that primary funding for Tequesta Park we would generate through other means, but there'd still be something there to assist or help out there. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the whole thing.
Okay.
So I know that our comprehensive plan talks about how many parks you need per resident and how much space, and I know that I would call it a stretch that we're meeting that standard. And we're talking about also the possibility of annexation, and that is a stretch too, we know that. But if we were to annex any of these communities, none of them have any parks. And to me, I think that's something that we need to be ahead of. And I do think it's important that the residents do make this decision as well. I agree that maybe reduce it from 10 million down to 5 or 6, to have something to be able to purchase any potential properties that might pop up. And I know that there has been. That would have been great for a future park, including Paradise Park. And so that's, to me, it's important to get the residents' input on this. And so I'd be in favor of going through a bond issue, which I do know that a $6 million bond issue is pointless. So if you're going to do a bond, at least do 10 million. So you're kind of in a problem there.
Okay.
So that's where things are at.
So the only clarification I wanted to get for the residents, because everything that we were handed says parkland, and I know we know a little more of the behind the scenes of what we've been looking at to meet our comp plan, what we were striving for in the strategic plan. It could include purchasing properties that currently have a house,
That's true.
and the plan could be to demolish and create a park. So if we were to ever annex certain neighborhoods, we could create them a park. Or in the current Village of Tequesta incorporated area, acquiring a piece of property that somebody wants to sell to Tequesta, and we would purchase it possibly with that bond. And it could be an addition to a park space that's already there, or we could be creating something new for more options. Is that correct? So it doesn't necessarily have to be open space right now. It could have something on it, and we would acquire it and create it as open space.
I think the general language that we have, that very similar to Jupiter, will allow that, but we'll make sure we craft it that way. So if that's the intent, which I'll just make sure Keith sees it and make sure that it's crafted to capture that, but I think it is now.
Okay.
With just looking at Jupiter's language, we added a line there for planning and development of space acquired that Jupiter didn't have. But we'll make sure we craft it that way.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, and I don't want to cut into your guys' conversation, but time is of the essence. If we're going to do this, we need to be able to know what you're directing staff to bring back to you, and it has to be, in this case, October 1st reading, second reading November. That's our deadline. I mean, so it gives us a month to draft it, but bring it back to you in order to get it onto the next ballot. And so we need to be very specific on what you guys are asking staff for.
Okay, and I'm actually, just so you guys know, I'm fine with asking residents if they want to move forward with this and vote on it, or not asking them, but if they vote on it and they tell us if they're okay with it, because like Mr. Stone said, there was in the past some things that were opportunities that we were not in position to acquire. And there was one that would have added to Constitution Park that we were not in a position to acquire. So
Same
I,
with the Remembrance Park, the house went for sale.
and there's the Remembrance Park house
Too bad
that
we can't buy that and
we couldn't
extend
get that
Remembrance
to
Park.
extend it, so that's bigger picture, that's what I'm thinking as well. But I have no problem asking the residents to vote and tell us.
But you're right, we have talked about the properties adjacent to Constitution Park. in the
There's a
past,
couple
so
of them, yep.
That was an excellent point.
Any comments?
No, just that I do feel, just echoing everyone else here, residents should decide
Yep.
with this, for sure.
Okay. Just like, I mean, I want to make sure I'm reading this right. If we have the examples of the 20-year loan, I do understand that's the calendar year, right? You can only apply for one a calendar year. It's not fiscal year, it's January, December.
Ask the question again, I'm
For
sorry.
the, like the state revolving fund, we can only apply once a calendar year, correct?
But in this situation, be bonding versus
Right,
the
but I'm looking at-
qualified bank loan
Yeah.
is within the calendar year, $10 million.
I'm saying if we look at that option instead, because will it cost the taxpayers less to go that route than the bond?
The percentage rate is lower if you can get it according to today's market rates. But like I said, it depends. I don't think in this situation, with the time being of the essence, and it sounds like we're wanting to move on it. I would say that's probably not an option for us because we're looking at the state revolving fund as well, and so that'd be $10 million of borrowing the same year.
Yeah, and I am not against a bond or asking the residents for a bond. I've been saying this since I've been on council. I have a hard time asking this year, because I mean, $210 average, I guess, that's a lot. And if the majority vote, there could be a lot of people that, I mean, this is a big impact in consideration with everything else that has increased. So I do take that into consideration. Maybe it's not the right year. And if we're rushing this for a potential opportunity on Paradise Park, I don't know if that's the best decision for us. I just
Well,
want to make sure we're really thinking this through.
yeah, I mean, $210 a year is $19 a month. Again, not a significant cost. And you're right.
But it is a significant cost when everything else has raised.
I
We're
understand.
talking about accelerating the water main replacements. It's just $16. I mean,
I know.
it adds up. And you heard what Marsh said about senior citizens. Like, this really impacts people. I don't like
Yeah.
comments that make it seem like everyone in the village can afford this,
No.
because they can't.
Well, but again, that's why I'm saying, that's why I'm in favor of the bond issue, because the village residents, one, get to decide. The 15 basis point difference in the interest rate is not going to, the big difference here in interest paid is due to the duration of 30 years versus 20. And again, if we're able to raise other funds from other sources, we can retire this early. But
Your loan to pay off too.
yeah, but it gives us the opportunity to have funds available, and I will disagree with you. I think Paradise Park is a significant opportunity for us, and you're right. If we do not have funding available, the opportunity in all likelihood was going to pass us by. It passed us by once. There's a good chance it may become available again. I'd hate to see that land lost. I just think we, as a council and a village, we will regret the day that we allowed that park to be developed rather than turn it into beneficial parkland for the residents. That's just my perspective on it.
How do we know that Paradise Park might not happen with the current person that's looking at the property? I mean, I would like something more factual to make this decision, then it might fall through.
Just for record, I'm not basing my decision just on Paradise Park. Mine is much more of a bigger picture
Well, I'm
for
basing-
in the
Neither am I.
different neighborhoods,
Yeah,
and
and neither am I.
Right,
but I
I'm
think-
big picture too, and that's what I'm saying.
I'm just putting
To
on the
me,
record,
maybe
mine's
this
not
isn't the
solely
year,
focused
but
on
we
that
can
part.
ask next year, maybe the
I
economy
agree.
approves, it won't
Right.
be, because if like the majority vote, but a lot of people that can't afford it, that
oh, I hear you.
are gonna have to pay for it anyways.
And I absolutely agree, it all adds up.
But I
I
think-
feel it.
And I agree, it isn't just about Paradise Park, but the timing is such that if Paradise Park does fall through, and you asked me, what's the issue there? The issue is that the current proposed buyer who signed a contract in December, who was supposed to close in March, has not. And they have another extension, and the extension is based on their coming forth with a plan to the village that the village fully accepts. And if we do not fully accept their plan, they will, as I understand it, they will not go forward with the purchase. So I don't know what they're going to bring us. I know there's been discussion about density issues. There's been discussions about a number of things that could be problematic in the development of that property. They may find it's not cost effective to develop it based on the current code. So I'm saying there is a legitimate chance, I can't give you the odds, but I do know there's a legitimate chance that that sale may not go through. And I think, again, personally, and I think for a lot of the people I've spoken to in the village who would like to see our park opportunities expanded, they would like to see us preserve it if we can. And the only way we can do that, and again, as soon as the voters say yes, is if we have a pool of money available to make the acquisition at that time. But again, it's not just about Paradise Park. It's about, as both Lori and Kyle said it, and Aaron, it's about putting ourselves in a better position overall as we go forward.
Okay, well, I think we all know how everyone feels about the bond. A couple other questions I had for donations is that, and Keith, this is probably more your question for you, can we try to solicit donations? I mean, how can municipality try to get donations towards parks?
I don't know that there's a legal, well, there's a question, the donation clearly would be for a municipal purpose. I'm trying, thinking through how we do it, like with Fox and that's, but the council endorses that program and allows staff to solicit donations. I think the short answer is yes, you can do that, but there are procedures that we have to follow in terms of documenting what we do and making sure that we comply with the Commission on Ethics requirements on that, and that there's no quid pro quos and there's no individual benefit, which based on what we're talking about tonight, I don't see that there would be at all, but so yeah, I think the short answer is it's possible, but we need to make sure we do it correctly.
Okay, yeah, I'd like some more information on how we could try to get donations, and maybe any municipalities nearby had any success with that for parks projects. Can I get I want to understand our recreation impact fee. What does that entail right now? Is like a certain percentage of each building permit, or?
No, I mean, the general basic thing is when you have a residential property, they pay an impact fee. It goes into a fund. We can use it for specific things in recreation that, the idea is that they're paying for that additional impact to our parks. So I think the last number I saw, we had like $14,000. We hadn't used it in a number of years, so there's not a huge draw financially for the impact fees. I think that $14,000 probably included the reserve fees, because that was a residential impact.
How much was that again? You said
14,000.
14,000, so it's not significant. I know we've looked at it, those impact fees and increasing it. I know that, Nilsa had some hesitations because we just have to make sure we find a rational nexus on that fee, so.
I think, and maybe, I don't know if you could increase the impact fee, and this kind of goes along with the open space requirements and what we've talked about with Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I know I had asked Jeremy for Treasure Coast final presentation to have some data of a recent development or proposed development of what would additional density look like, or additional story, because we all say no, no, no. Maybe it's still no, but we don't really have the data to understand, like, okay, take this, like the reserve. If we allowed this much more density, or, I mean, stories isn't a good example there, but don't increase the density, allow another story. What does that look like in regards to the actual impact of, more people in the building, more people on the streets, the impact to our
cars.
Utilities, more cars. So I think we should, like I say, the answer might still be no. I know no one ever wants to talk about increasing density or adding a story. I'm not saying I do, but I think it'd be helpful for us to really make a good decision, to really understand what that true impact would be, like sampling a current property, to know if we for sure don't want to go down the route of trying to get more open space requirements, or I don't know if you could do something like you increase an recreation impact fee, but they would get something in return, like more density. So thinking outside the box and just maybe having some actual data to really see what that impact would be. Like I said, the answer still might be no. I know it's really not a popular subject, and I don't know that I want that. But I don't know what it actually looks like. Like if Paradise Park were developed with the plan we saw originally, what would that look like if we allowed density or an additional story? So, because that is the only other avenue to really get money in and work with developments to increase our open space. So I think that's something else to try to understand a little bit better.
I don't think I'm willing to sacrifice our culture to increase density.
Yeah, I don't think, one, the additional funding,
For
or
additional
fees would be significant, and two, density comes with required parking, and, you already have an issue with, even at the current density for Paradise Park, having a huge parking lot, and the place ends up looking like a used car lot. And I'm not in favor of that, so.
And we're currently not even at max density.
Yeah.
That's really where I sit, is we aren't even at max. And I do take sensitivity to, even with the developments that are possibly coming towards us soon for presentation, that's gonna be adding a lot more people to our stores, our schools, our roads, wear and tear on everything. I'm obviously, we've all watched it, and I grew up here in South Florida, and I'm very sensitive to how much we're gonna add. And this village, like Mr. said, is so special. I'm very cautious adding. I wouldn't mind looking at data, but I mean, we aren't even fully there yet. And we're gonna be getting more. And then as the other buildings are getting redeveloped, they're adding more. So that's where I kind of sit right now with that.
Yeah, no, and I don't disagree. I
Yeah, I'm
don't
not
think
saying-
I want to, but I like
Yeah.
the data, like at least see it. Because
hear
we
you.
will have our time getting any, kind of civic open space or anything from any of the projects if we don't.
And that's kind of why I was.
So that's just a realization we have to be okay with, that we might not get some of the things we want. And I think a lot of us, that's what we prefer. We don't want to increase density or add additional story on any, mixed use areas. But like the data, you guys can tell I'm data driven. Even if I'm pretty sure I'm going to say no, I still want to see the data.
So I haven't tore into that impact fee for recreation. I'm sure it's very similar to what I've had experience with, but like that redevelopment of 300 building, I mean, that's one less unit, so there wouldn't even be an impact fee for rec. It's redevelopment. I mean, they've already that, so it's less of an impact on the village because it has one less unit in it. So we'll have to look at it, but.
And then depending on the nature of the development, because like if you look at the 300 building, the 250 building, you're likely not going to see families in there where you have children of school age in all likelihood. You may have a few, but generally speaking, I think those are going to be older individuals, a lot of snowbirds. I mean, if you look at the demographics that you see on the island, you're getting that, that mix leans more that way than it does full-time residents, which is, from a tax standpoint, is great for us, because we will benefit significantly from those additional revenues.
Okay. All right. So I think I did not open for public comment. Marcia can go first this time.
I go first.
We'll take turns.
Do you agree?
Actually, I hardly ever agree with him, but that's okay. I think the referendum is a good deal, and I have a reason why is because charter is going to be on that vote. And if we can get referendum on the vote, maybe people will come out because they won't come out for charter. So that's just kind of Frank's thing about buying that swale between the library, which we own that property, and the kind of got me thinking about, really looking beyond Paradise Park. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to have a bond issue as long as the people know what you're thinking about acquiring. And as long as DeQuesta Park's out of the, if the state says, yeah, we can buy it, which they're not going to do. But that's always my thing, that we don't own that park, and so I'm kind of like, I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on that park because we don't own it. But there's also another piece of property, and I'm not going to say where it is, but it's unincorporated, but it's all around is DeQuesta. And that might be coming up. It's a couple acres. And so if that happened, can you buy unincorporated property and then you just annex it in?
As long as it's in Palm Beach County.
As long as it's in Palm Beach County. So, yeah, I'm kind of for this. Don't drop dead.
Yeah. Mr. Bradford?
Excuse me. I don't know where to begin. I'm dumbfounded by this conversation. Some people in this room are living in an alternative universe. It could be me or it could be others, but something is wrong, because it's a fundamental of poli-sci, political science 101, that timing is everything politically. And for you people to think putting this bond on the ballot in March is good timing just blows my mind. It is horrible timing. Molly is absolutely correct. It will sink because, let's go down the list. You've got a 3% tax increase. You've got an increase of 3 or more % for water rates, plus maybe up to $16 on top of all of that. Then you've got the garbage rates going up and water rates going up and everything like that. And then you want to add this for the voters who will have experienced it by the time you vote on it. It's just completely absurd. Completely absurd politically. And Paradise Park is not a place for a 3-acre neighborhood park in the center of a central business district. It's absurd, Mr. D'Ambra. It's completely absurd. And the Treasure Coast has shown you 2 examples of how you can do a park in that property with a developer that should come in at some point in time. And then to hear you all, some of you say that you're not willing to talk about ways and means to use density to your advantage, blows my mind. Molly at least has an open mind. Let's talk about it. Let's see if there's something that we can do. But it just blows my mind. You've making a critical mistake. If you want this bond issue to ever be passed, now is not the time because of all of the stuff you have on the plate at this very moment.
Tom, everything you described as far as the rates, the tax increases, they're going to be there next year too. They're going to be there the year after. These aren't one-year events. So the argument that because these things are going up, somehow that negates the timing, because a year later it's going to be different. It's not going to be any different. And as far as Paradise Park goes, I disagree with you. You've had a vested interest in that because when you were manager, there was a development plan for that park. I understand that, but I disagree with you. You have Central Park in New York. I'm not saying we're New York, but you do have municipalities that have parks in their commercial areas for a variety of reasons. So we'll just agree to disagree on the desirability of having a park in that location.
Well, if you're correct, why didn't Treasure Coast do a 3-acre park in that location?
Because
But you know, but I disagree with you saying that it's going to have these level of increases across the board for every year in the future. My position on the matter is the reason that you're having to do these things now is because during the last 20 years, there was failure to do proper budgeting and planning for financial purposes, and now you're playing catch up. And for you to think that you should and will be able to do that in the future, then your political life will be shortened by taking that position. That's my position.
Well, that's good, because I don't consider myself a politician, but
Okay, do we have any more public comment? No? Okay. What would council like to proceed with?
I'm in favor.
same.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass.
Right.
I'm okay with that as well.
What is the timeline if it doesn't pass that it could come up again?
If it doesn't pass it
Like
by the
begins-
voters?
Yeah.
By the voters.
If it didn't pass
What's
in
the
March.
timeline of when it could get brought up again?
6 months.
6 months.
Oh, so,
Okay.
And I probably shouldn't add any fuel to any fire or anything, just also know that you probably have a housing bond that will be on the Palm Beach County. It'll be up for referendum. You also, I believe, have a school bond referendum that'll be up, so this would be a third for our voters, just one way or another, so.
but, so, yeah, so I'm glad you asked that, Laura, because I don't know that either. So by that, 6 months, and how many times can we do that? Every year?
There's no limit to how many
Right, so that's what I'm
times
saying.
you
I mean,
can-
if now's not the time, they'll tell us that. And they'll also tell us when it is the time if we decide to continue to put this on the ballot.
Because I am torn, and I totally, completely understand where President Mr. Bradford is explaining to us. I'm not saying it's the greatest time, but we have heard from residents that they want more. And I am very aware that there will be other things on the ballot. I am not a fan when the ballots are super heavy, because we don't want voters to get impatient and just scroll through them. But then again, for someone, a small village like we don't have usually a lot. And to get a lot of voters
There's a lot
out,
on it.
if they have a purpose, because there's other things there, it might actually get them out to the polls, because we don't usually have that great of a turnout in the first place. And for something that's so important, and it's gonna be their money, and it's such a big decision for the residents and the taxpayers, I mean, I want them to participate. So that's kind of why I'm really torn on the timing. It's unfortunate that it's coming up now, but again, if they say no, I say we continue the conversation with them and then maybe bring it back up if they are absolutely dead set on no, then again, for me, it's just a continuing conversation with our residents and being open with them and feeling them out. So, yes?
Yeah, I mean, consensus is yes. I'm 100% in favor of asking for a bond. I just don't think
Yeah,
this
I'm
next
torn, but
ballot is the time to do it. And I do want more information on what we can do, the extent we can do to try to obtain donations.
This is what, for the November ballot or March?
November, right?
March.
No,
No, this would be for
next
March.
year.
This would be March.
This would be for March. The supervisor of elections deadline, I believe,
Is
is
November.
early December. So you'd have to have the ordinance passed, as the manager indicated, by your November council meeting in order to get it to the supervisor of elections in time for the March 2023, so it would be on the same ballot as your charter amendments.
And when do we need to make the decision? Sorry.
Well,
December.
you could have first reading in October, second reading in November, assuming it
Submit to
passed.
December.
That would give us enough time to get the documents to the supervisor of elections for the March 2023 municipal
And
ballot.
could
These
it
seats will
be
be
on a
on the ballot,
November
too.
ballot in
These
the
seats will be
future?
on the ballot too.
Yeah.
It could be.
In the future, I don't.
I mean,
you'll
obviously,
never make-
2024 is the
And the
next
charter.
big,
Charter November.
big.
You'll never
November.
make this year.
Yeah, but you could have it in November 2024.
I know, I mean, that's a little ways out, but I mean, that's a presidential election, so people will be going out. That's where I'm kind of torn on. I'd rather have it on a ballot where people are going out for multiple purposes, because they're more prone to get up and go vote when they have a lot of important things on there.
I have no problem if it's in March or November of next year.
Well, it wouldn't be November of next year. It's either March of '23 or if.
I was just asking if it could be on
Yeah, if we
November.
did it in March of '23 and they said, yes, we're done, if they said no, you could either
We
do
try to get
March
the
of
following
2024 or November of 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and what I'm saying is I'm okay if we do it in March or if we wait for the next election cycle for it. But I'd like to see us move forward with it sometime next year.
Okay, we're gonna bring that back to you guys, because it sounds like there's a consensus to move it forward. We'll bring it back to you guys October with all the language, and then we'll formulate a game plan, assuming it would pass by the council, and I hate to do that, but, a game plan to have some public engagement meetings in order to promote this. As you guys know, the state law no longer allows us to go door to door. We can't be passing out flyers, can't be sending stuff out regarding this. And so, you know, the best engagement tool we have is to have some public forums to do that. So, we'll try to come up with a game plan for that.
But Jeremy, we can still prepare material for distribution if they request it, correct?
You can prepare the material, you cannot send it
You
out.
can't send it out, they have to ask for it.
And the new law does not,
So if we have public meetings and people come.
you
and
can
we
have town hall meetings,
And
or
we can have the
whatever.
material there and they can take it with them.
That is correct,
Okay.
but you cannot send
You
it.
can't be proactive
Nope.
in the sense of, yeah, I understand.
Hey, since we're on that topic, since it kind of ties into this, we're talking about the ballot, and I am a social media person, what is the new legality if I were to post that we have a charter vote? Do I just,
The legislation
general
that
information?
amended, it is very clear that it does not prohibit any elected official from exercising their First Amendment rights.
so I'm not saying, just for public listening, I'm not saying I would put what I would choose for you to vote on the ballot, but just for information you put out there so you can read it, you have access to it, and then that way you can think about it and really ask questions.
And I will tell you, there is no guidance out there
Okay.
on this new amendment to the legislation, but it is very clear that, it does say it is not intended to limit any elected officials' First Amendment rights to speak their mind about issues.
Okay.
And so in that vein, because I think my next column for smoke signals is going to be the winter edition, can I speak to this issue in smoke signals, or because that's a village publication, would that be considered,
You can't talk about
even though
the
I'm expressing?
a referendum. You can't
Okay.
say this is going to be on the ballot.
Okay,
I think you can express your opinion about the subject of parks and the importance of parks, but you cannot also say there's going to be a bond
Please vote
question
for it.
on the March ballot.
Okay.
You can't mention that at all.
all right. Well, when I write that, I will submit it for review.
I have a question, if you don't mind. If a committee is formed that is going to push either or charter, can you have meetings in the town facilities?
There's nothing wrong with having public meetings or
Okay.
workshops, and you can even hand out printed material at those meetings. What we can't do is put the
Is
thing in an
solicit.
envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it out to
Solicit.
people.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah,
Or
I
hand
think-
deliver it. It's,
I know Jeremy and I talked about I mean, all of council about doing like a town hall at the rec center, like that would be maybe appropriate time to do a town hall, but can you maybe just do a memo on and outline do's and don'ts? I know you sent some, but I think having it all in one place would be helpful for us. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 3. This is to discuss rules and policies regarding public participation at meetings.
Just summarize, Mr. Harold, he brought up this item. We had a request to discuss this at a future workshop about either extended 3 minutes or being allowed to transfer your 3 minutes to another speaker. And so what we've done is we've put together, the clerk's office has put together, emailed other offices and seen what they did. So obviously you have our resolution establishing our procedures. It specifically prohibits being able to transfer your time. So if council wants to consider that, we could bring back an amended version if that's what council wants to do. So it's open for discussion, and we'll take any direction you guys want.
Okay, council comments? Did you have something to say?
Well, I think when this.
Well, hold on 1 second.
I'm sorry.
So if, with your permission, if I could perhaps frame the discussion a little bit, I want you all to keep in mind a couple things. First of all, your current policy is absolutely legal. It would survive any judicial challenge in terms of the 3 minutes, in terms of not allowing someone to give their 3 minutes to someone else, in terms of your rules of decorum and how you maintain order, and the idea that if somebody is disruptive, you give them a warning, and if they continue to be disruptive, you can have them removed from the meeting. All of that is absolutely been judicially tested as high up as the United States Supreme Court. These meetings are your meetings. This is your opportunity to conduct the business of the village in conformance with the government and the Sunshine Law. So, to the extent that there's a mindset that these meetings belong to the public, I completely disagree. These meetings belong to the village council. Now, by law, the public is absolutely entitled to be able to attend. And under the Sunshine Law, the public has to be given a meaningful and reasonable opportunity to provide comment to you on any agenda item at least once before you vote on it, and on just general non-agenda items. But within that framework, the law considers this to be a limited public forum. I mean, it's not like the sidewalk where somebody can stand out there all day long and advocate for whatever they want to advocate for. This is a limited public forum where you have the right to not only control the amount of time someone has, but how they behave and what the content is, in terms of, you're allowed to say, okay, we're on this agenda item, so we're only going to take public comment about this agenda item. Really, the limits under the law is that you can't control or limit speech based on the point of view of any particular item. So whether somebody agrees with a position you're taking or opposes it, you can't limit speech based on the point of view. But all the other things that we currently have are absolutely legal. I just want you to keep in mind those things, that at the end of the day, this is your meeting, and you are absolutely entitled to have it be run in an orderly fashion with those parameters. Now, that if you want to make 3 minutes 5 minutes, or if you want to provide opportunities for people to share their 3 minutes, there's nothing unlawful about doing that. But I just want you to keep that in mind, that you are absolutely entitled. And I think as you look at what the clerk's office prepared, you will see that what we have is fairly across the board, very common, and I would argue considered best practices. So, thank you.
Okay, council comments?
I was going to reference what Keith just said when this policy was originally established. And I think, again, the nexus, and I know Keith explained this to us years ago, was the fact that we can only meet in the sunshine. So these meetings at the workshops are our only opportunity for the 5 of us actually to talk to one another. And I think he had said, you know, you need to be cognizant of that, and you need to be cognizant of managing that time effectively. However, I am not against, if one individual wants to get up and dedicate their 3 minutes to another individual on a specific topic, I'm against it if it's a scenario people who keep getting up, but if they want to do it one time, somebody gets up, they're talking, somebody says, you know what, either they want to continue that conversation, or they want to say, I want to give my 3 minutes to somebody, I could see doing that one time, but not beyond that.
May I add something to what you're advocating for is not necessarily unlawful. The most important thing, I think, and the quickest way that any council will get in trouble, whether you have a rule of decorum or not, is not being consistent in how you apply it. So if you want to do something like that, we really have to make sure that we always do it the same way under every circumstance, because if you do it this way for this item and that way for a different item, and this person is treated a little different, that is where you will get in trouble the quickest on this.
No, I agree. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be across the board on any item that people are speaking to. But I would be, you know, there are some times where I think we've had people get frustrated because they would have liked to have had a little bit more time to express themselves. And if they've got other people in the room who are the same mindset, and somebody says, well, rather than me get up and speaking, I'd rather let this person continue, I don't have a problem. Again, so it'd be a maximum of 6 minutes, and it would be, you could hand it off once. But that would be, and then if you hand it off, you can't get up and speak on that topic yourself, because you've given your time to somebody else. So I'm not against a one-time transfer of time.
Okay, any other comments?
I mean, that's kind of where I was sitting. Any person that is sitting in this room during a public meeting, I would personally want to hear from them if they wanted to stand up and take their 3 minutes. I have no problem if somebody wants to give the person speaking their 3 minutes, but yes, they are sacrificing their 3 minutes then they don't get an additional 3 minutes to take their extra turn. So for me, it's just, you can give each other your time, but you have to obviously physically be here. I mean, they can speak if they wanted to, so it's.
And just, again, you don't want a second and a third and a fourth person doing that to one speaker. So that's where I'm saying the absolute max is 6 minutes.
Yeah, Venice had, that. I mean, that was one of the things I highlighted on here. Venice did it up to a maximum of 10 minutes. And I thought that was a pretty good idea, but then like, who manages that? Like, would Lori manage that?
Right.
It's like, I'm not gonna be able to be communicating, okay, wait, who did what? Like, how do we manage that?
You have a timer, but keep in mind 10 minutes might not sound bad, but all you need is 6 people
Well, yeah,
to talk
so,
for
like,
10
I'm not
minutes.
saying 10 minutes,
There's
6
an
minutes,
extra
whatever.
hour that you.
Oh, for sure.
So that adds up. You know, just think about 10 minutes in and of itself doesn't sound bad, but if you give one person 10, you got to give everybody 10. And if they take advantage of that, we'll have a
and
lot more
then-
really good lunches like we have
I would
back
think that they would have to
For a lot
turn in
more.
a comment card to me. That way I would have the ability to pull that comment card out and make that notation and monitor that, manage that.
Well, you could reset.
Yeah, because someone's gonna
reset the
have to,
clock.
because I'm not, like, what if someone that gave up their time, like, comes to, like, I'm not gonna know, wait, did you give up your time? Like, how are we gonna manage that? I'm not gonna know.
I think they would have to state on the record, I am forfeiting my opportunity to speak on this item and giving up my time to this speaker, and it would have to be noted for the record, and as the clerk said, you'd have to keep that on the comment card somehow and keep track of it that way.
Because the last thing you want to do is be here at 11 o'clock at night.
Right, yeah. And Inverness also caught my eye. They did 3 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes if someone's representing a group or organization. I didn't think that was a bad idea either. Like, for example, if Mr. Bradford is representing something in the EAC that was really important on an agenda item, if he was speaking out on behalf of all of the EAC,
Well, that would be
That would be
just him
5
saying
minutes.
that, right? How are you gonna
well,
make
exactly,
sure that
how are we
that's
gonna
true?
verify all of this
That's why we
and
don't
track
change
it
any of
and-
this.
I was gonna say.
Nothing. See,
I'm happy
already
the way
this
it
is
is.
becoming a huge headache. I say we change nothing.
I would agree.
I mean, what's beyond a couple of people saying, I wish I had a couple more minutes? What have the problems been? Like, what are we fixing? This feels like solutionism, right? Finding a solution for something that's not really a problem here. So I say we leave it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been a problem in the past. I know, I mean, I'm pretty strict on the 3-minute rule, which hasn't seemed popular at times, but I do feel like if you are selective and let some people talk more, you either have to let everyone talk more, or like it could be perceived that, oh, this topic's more important to me personally, so I'm gonna let this person talk longer. It's just like, I think you need to draw the line and keep it 3 minutes for everyone. So I don't know in the past if it's been more lenient, and that's why it's come up as an issue, but
I mean, that's a tough position for you to be in, or anyone in that seat, right? I know I read one of the municipalities said, hey, if they're in the middle of a sentence, we'll let them finish.
Right.
Sure, I mean, you always do.
Which I've done, yeah.
But that's it.
And I think even our own code says if we want, I don't know, it doesn't say additional time, but if we want to have someone talk directly, then the council can vote to say, hey, we'll give them more time.
There is an opportunity for the council to suspend that 3-minute rule.
Yep.
If the entire council is in favor of it. I believe that's how the rule
That's how it's in there.
reads.
So, I mean, it's in there, and all you have to do is ask, is the council okay if we give them an additional 2 minutes? Yes, no. And it's not all on you.
right.
The only issue then becomes the equal application.
Right.
Yeah, that's where
Then
I
it's,
ended up.
then it's.
So that's why, I agree, common sense would tell you we ought to be able to do that. But then somebody could say, well, wait a minute, you let
Right.
this person speak, but.
If I say yes, I have to say yes
Selective.
every single
Not me.
time.
Well, no, let's take it to the vote. No.
Well, no, but even if the council says yes, and the next person could get up and say, well, I want some extra time too, and the council could say no.
One way to approach that, it sort of blends with what the mayor was talking about. If that person, if you didn't adopt a extended period of time for someone representing a group, that might be, somebody said, well, I'm can I have a couple extra minutes because I'm representing all these other people. The council could say, okay, and then that could be that's a reasonable and objective and reason, and if you're able to be consistent if that's what you do, and you don't have it in your rule, by way of example.
I mean, I'd be okay with that too, because that's almost the same as somebody who's out there as part of the group saying, I want to give this person my 3 minutes. It has the same net effect, so if you want to do it that way, I'm okay. I do think there are times when you do want to give people just a little bit of extra time to fully express whatever idea or thought they have, so however we go about it, I do think the 3 minutes at sometimes is just not quite long enough maybe to give somebody a chance to have their full say.
Okay, well, I don't think anyone's in favor of changing 3 minutes, and it sounds like no one's in favor of the 2 other items discussed with the groups or rolling over your time with someone else for like 6 minutes.
It's good the way it is.
Okay, public comment?
Sorry, the incident that caused a citizen to bring this 3-minute rule to your attention pertained to something that happened to me. That evening, I was speaking on behalf of the EAC, and I had actually practiced and had timed myself at home, and I don't know what happened, but I couldn't get half of what I needed to say out in the 3 minutes, or when the buzzer went off, or whatever. But similar to what I think Frank said, was I got with Jessica Namath, and we I showed her my notes, and she came back after she got her act together, and she spoke the remainder of what I had to say. But I just wanted you to know I have never spoken to that gentleman about anything that he's ever said. That doesn't bother me. It all worked out okay in terms of getting the EAC message to you. I do think that it would be beneficial to grant, I don't know how much time, or maybe there'd be no time limit at all, depends on what you think, but if the planning and zoning chairman had been asked by the planning and zoning board to come and speak to you about an issue, what's wrong with that person having more than 3 minutes? What's wrong with if the EAC has requested me to come and speak? The only difference would be that I ought to say, okay, the EAC has requested that I come and speak, and I am speaking on behalf of the EAC. Tonight I commented on just about everything, but it's all Tom Bradford. It's not EAC. So I do think there's some merit to allowing more time somehow for one of your boards and committees to have more time. Maybe they coordinate with Jeremy, maybe they coordinate with the mayor, I don't know, maybe there is no coordination, but I would think a board and a committee that works for you, and that board asked them to come and speak to you, that they may need more time than 3 minutes.
Would the
That's-
alternative be to put that on the agenda?
Depends on what we're talking about. If they want to present something, we just put them as a presentation.
Well, that's,
If they're wanting to talk about a specific topic that.
Meaning that's on
like
the
an
agenda already.
item, then it'd be up to obviously the mayor has an opportunity to let anybody speak for as long as she wants. Obviously try to keep it fair, but, in a situation where it's our board, be consistent with that. Where if it was the EAC and you want to consistently give them time, that's more than 3 minutes, you could. Just make sure that you're fair with it.
What if it's a quasi judicial matter? Could they be, if it's someone from one of our boards or committees, could they be sworn in to be able to speak
If they're gonna
instead
be,
of being on the public comment portion?
if you had a situation, your staff or even under certain circumstances, a board member may have testimony that would require them to be sworn, and they could be. Generally speaking, the public does not have to be sworn in just to say, I'm in favor of this, or I think the building should be blue instead of green. That's not testimony for the record in a quasi-judicial proceeding. But if you had, Nilsa testifies at every quasi-judicial hearing about her staff report, so that is part of the record. She's not limited to 3 minutes. If there was additional information that a board member had that was by way of evidence, not just by way of personal opinion, that there's nothing that would stop that from happening. You could allow that person to be sworn and place the evidence on the record without being limited to the 3 minutes.
So I think that would be a good way to handle if they want to speak, like I said, factually on quasi-judicial, and then we can just, if we know it's one of our groups, they should know and tell us, and we can vote if we want to give them more time or not. And just handle it like that for now and see how it goes.
I would think that one of our boards would already, prior to the meeting, even if it's 2 hours before, they would know that they're gonna have someone speak on their behalf, so maybe they can just inform someone real quick.
Right.
I know if the EAC has elected Tom Bradford to come speak on an item on their behalf, it's been decided already. It's not decided during the meeting, it's already been decided, same to P&Z. Okay.
Okay, all right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Always entertaining.
Something.